Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Marshall Marcus, who serves as CEO of the European Union Youth Orchestra. Marshall, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much, Aaron. And it's always so great to see you. That smile is enough. Very good.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. And, I'm always curious, and last time we talked, kind of how things were going across the pond. But I wanted to kind of just start off this time with actually just talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how they kind of relate to that work that you're doing. I think that a lot of organizations, leaders in the States who are working in the arts, that this could really be of interest, and seeing how certain aspects could be relevant to some of the work and goals, collaborations that they're working on.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And that's it's a really interesting place to start. If I think back the last few years, the kind of things we've been hit by, climate change, obviously huge issue. Black Lives Matter last year was absolutely massive. COVID. It's very interesting to me that it seems to me that the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals set in 2015, and for an agenda which we're trying to hit by 2030, I just discovered, or I felt that here, almost everything that's one of those worries we have that kind of gets us up in the morning and we're thinking about, all of them seem to be contained within what the SDGs, as they're called. And so I've really been thinking a lot in the last period, and my organization has, about how we can knit those into the work we do. Because, you just look through of them. I've just been doing some work on the things, SDG 4, gender equality, climate change, sustainable cities, partnerships, all of these big issues are really, I suddenly had this kind of moment when I thought, there's very little here that's not covered. And so they've become a kind of inspiration for how we're looking as an organization to move forward. And they help us to place a lot of other things which might seem to sit on their own within this big, under this big umbrella. And it's all about sustainability. So, with our players, we're beginning to look very deeply at things like, how do you sustain your career? These are young players in their 20s. What's it going to be like in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years when you and I will stop doing these sessions, but young people will be leading, they'll be there. And so they're kind of the sustainability of the planet and the sustainability of us as people taking responsibility seems to me that's where our frontier is at the moment.
Wow. And I think that's obviously applicable to, all arts organizations. And I think about whether you're an orchestra or a presenter or a conservatory, music school, or even just ensembles themselves, and chamber music ensembles, that this is relevant. And I love how you're kind of tying that in. So one question I would have, so I feel like we've gone through a lot of change this year. A lot of leaders are thinking about bringing about more change than they certainly would have a year or 2 years ago in their organizations, related to, digital platforms, related to, of course, diversity, equity work. But what would you say to those who might, still be kind of in a very traditional mold and say, we don't need kind of these UN sustainability goals, right? We're about playing the right notes and playing them in the right rhythm, kind of what to some may seem a bit antiquated these days, but of course it does still exist. What would you say to people who might have reticence to be thinking this way?
Well, I think that's a brilliant question. And you put me on the spot in exactly the right way. I think I think that these goals, that kind of attitude and these goals, there's space within and around this kind of thing. So it depends how you frame this. I mean, in a way, I just want to play the notes. I think that approach, yeah, you may get by really well on it at the moment. You might survive with it. But I think personally that as every year goes on, it's going to be harder and harder to make it work by just clinging to this kind of old tradition. And I remember there's a phrase used by the Council of Europe, the European Council, which is the European countries together in the EU, and they looked at this in 2017 and they brought out a report and they said, we, the European Union, must become front runners in this respect. And I think there's a thing here. I mean, it's as old as the hills. Where do you want to be with respect to the edge? And I think for me, this is where it is. And of course, you can stay well behind it if you want. And many people will make fantastic livings and they'll survive okay. And as long as the funding is there, that's fine. But I just have the feeling that we're looking at a slope here. And, if I think back to the 1980s, 1990s, the noughties, it was easier to stay in the old model. And I feel that every year it's more difficult. And I think that COVID is the biggest kick we've had not to stay in that old model.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really, I think profound and is just the reflection of the reality for sure. So you mentioned COVID, right? So it is, I think, certainly for the first time in a year, we all are seeing some potential light at the end of the tunnel. But how we're all going to emerge as organizations, I think still has so many unknowns wrapped around it. And so I'm curious, obviously, a lot of our viewers are, leading organizations or in roles in organizations where they have a lot of decisions that to be made about how to do this. So curious, what are you doing there? What are some of your plans as we begin to kind of bridge back? And I assume you won't go back to normal, but it will be the new normal. What is that looking like for you?
Well, I have to say that this supposed new normal still feels, I agree with you, not that I would say it in that way, it still feels a little way off. And, I think, first of all, it's a little bit like, I like climbing hills and mountains. And you have that sensation, you're going up and you see the top, you get towards it, and actually suddenly you realize it's not the top. It's just a mini peak on the way up there. And, I think this kind of cyclical thing is what we're all involved in. And that's why I still keep feeling that we've got to keep thinking about the long, this is a real marathon. And I don't like the idea that, we'll get some vaccinations, we'll get that done, it's all going to be fine. I think it's going to be more complicated than that. So I think the move back the move towards that, whatever that is going to be quite a long and changeable kind of curve. So, what we're doing is we're making, instead of doing a plan, normally if I look at 2022, 23, I want to have my plan in there for where are the projects, who's conducting, where is it happening, who are the teachers, all the rest of that. And now I'm kind of realizing that I have to have a series of potential plans, any of which may happen. And so this kind of needing to have this breadth of kind of thought about what might happen. And the fact that, change is so much more accepted by everybody. So, if I think about this summer, the orchestra has its big residency and tour. So we have that there. We also have 3 other plans, which we'll need to action at some point, depending where things are. And I think it's just going to carry on like this, if I'm honest. So that's one area. I think, so that's the kind of, what do I do with my current plans? Then there's the question of, what new stuff do I really want to get into at the moment, which I think might be useful, but didn't seem like it would have been useful a few years ago. And I think the question of e-learning, all the stuff online is not going away. So we are really trying to refine that. We did a lot of work last year. I'm sure we could have done it a lot better. I think I thought last year was a great year to fail in, actually. I mean, it's in the US, isn't it? Is it Silicon Valley, that kind of fail often and fail fast? And I think, so this year we're trying to refine those things, change them. We have a new learning platform we're in the midst of developing, but that's only a pilot year for that. So I think this kind of slow burn on that kind of digital side where we're not any longer just looking for, like the big bucks and the big sparks and do a great thing and it'll all be wonderful. I think it's really a kind of marathon runner's game at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I definitely, as you're kind of describing that, there really has been, I think, this utter sea change of how change is viewed. It used to be in our field, no, 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 we don't need to change things. We're not about change. We're about actually, in some ways the opposite of that. And that seems to really have changed in a permanent way, the actual approach or mindset about change.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the things that I see it's caused us to do in our change of the way we look at change is that, in the old days, it felt like change was a kind of on-off switch. This way, you do it that. You want to go the other way, it's like turning a tanker. It's a massive operation. Whereas actually, I think one of the things we're learning at the moment, I got this idea from Naomi Klein in a completely different kind of area, of this idea about lots of small changes. And actually, if one of the things you're about is helping people through a period of change, lots of small incremental changes are far easier to cope with than a kind of a big change.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things with us. So with our players, we're looking at questions. It's not like, okay, forget doing concerts, just try and go kind of and do things bit by bit online, and let's try it differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but Marshall, as always, it's just been informative and inspiring to hear your thoughts and to hear your wisdom and your sense of how best we can all move forward. Marshall Marcus, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you for being on the show.
Aaron, thank you so much.